Ever wondered what lurks just beyond the edge of your perception? What if the terrifying whispers you dismiss as imagination are actually just waiting for you to listen? Tonight, we're diving into 5 true accounts that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the darkness that surrounds us. If you're ready to face what's real, hit that like button and subscribe to join our journey into the unknown. Don't miss out on the chilling truths that are about to unfold. Anna didn't want to be here, not really. But after losing everyone in that accident, her mom, her little brother, gone in a single cruel twist of fate, the city felt like a cage. Every siren was a reminder, every smiling family a fresh wound. The Hoosier National Forest, vast and indifferent, promised a kind of quiet she desperately needed. She chose a lesser-known trail, one that snaked into a section notorious for its persistent mist, hoping to outrun the relentless ghosts in her head. Her fingers absently traced the cool metal of the locket around her neck. Their pictures, a small comfort, a heavy, aching weight against her chest. The deeper she hiked, the more the world shifted. The air grew thick, heavy with the ancient scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else. Something almost metallic, like ozone before a storm. Soon the mist began to roll in, not a gentle fog, but a creeping, suffocating wall of milky white that swallowed the towering oak and maple trees whole. Visibility dropped to mere feet, transforming the familiar forest into a claustrophobic tunnel. It was then the whispers started. Faint at first, like a breath against the back of her neck, then softer, like secrets carried on a non-existent breeze. Anna shook her head, attributing them to the wind, or perhaps her grief-addled mind playing cruel tricks. "You're alone here," she told herself, her voice barely a tremor in the profound silence. "It's just your imagination." But the whispers grew bolder, clearer, cutting through the thick, damp air. "Anna," a voice breathed, soft as a sigh, just to her right. It was her mother's voice, warm and familiar, yet subtly laced with an unnatural, chilling resonance. "Come closer, sweetheart." Anna froze, her boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum in the sudden, absolute quiet. No, this wasn't possible. Her mother was gone. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing the heels of her hands against her temples, trying to dispel the terrifying illusion. When she opened them, the mist was even denser, pressing in from all sides, a soft, suffocating blanket. Then came her brother's voice, impossibly youthful and pleading, just behind her left ear. "Anna, why did you leave us? It's so cold here. Don't be afraid." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the already indistinct path. A terrifying warmth spread through her chest, a desperate, irrational longing to turn and embrace the source of that voice, to follow it into the heart of the mist. But a bone-deep dread, colder than the surrounding fog, snaked up her spine, screaming at her to resist. This wasn't right. This wasn't them. The whispers intensified, becoming a chaotic chorus of beloved voices, overlapping and distorted, each one a sharp personal torment, urging her deeper into the swirling white expanse. Then, a new sound, chillingly distinct, cut through the ethereal cacophony, a faint, wet slithering, like something heavy and viscous being dragged slowly through the unseen undergrowth. It was immediately followed by a sickening, wet crunching, a sound like cartilage tearing and bone grinding on bone, echoing unnervingly close, just beyond the reach of her vision. Anna clamped a hand over her mouth, gagging, her stomach lurching. "Don't turn back," her mother's voice commanded, sharper now, less loving, tinged with a predatory edge. "You can't leave us again, not like before." Lost, disoriented, and now gripped by a primal, overwhelming terror, Anna stumbled forward, desperate to find any sign of the trail, any familiar landmark. The slithering and crunching kept perfect pace with her, always just behind, always just out of sight. A gruesome shadow. The voices became an unbearable torment, shifting from pleading to mocking, from sorrow to a chilling, possessive anger. She felt unseen eyes burning into her back, felt cold, fetid breath on her neck that wasn't the mist, but something else, something alive and ancient. Through the swirling white, a dark shape began to materialize, not a natural formation, but something unmistakably man-made. A small, dilapidated cabin, half swallowed by vines and rot, its timbers groaning softly, like an old person sighing. The voices now poured from its single, gaping window, a terrifying cacophony of her family's pleas and taunts, amplified, distorted, desperate, hungry. She saw fleeting, twisted shadows moving within its darkness, impossibly tall and gaunt, their limbs seeming to stretch and contract. A switch flipped in Anna's mind, fueled by the sheer terror of what she was witnessing. This wasn't her family. This was a nightmare made flesh, a malevolent mimic using her deepest, most vulnerable pain against her. A surge of primal adrenaline, cold and absolute, propelled her forward. She screamed, a ragged, raw sound that tore from her throat and was instantly swallowed by the thick mist, and she ran blindly, without a path, without direction, only away. She tore through the undergrowth, thorny branches whipping at her face, ripping at her clothes and skin. She hardly felt the searing pain, fueled by the desperate need for escape. The voices from the cabin behind her roared, a wave of distorted, guttural sound chasing her, promising to finish what was started and make her one of them. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs gave out, collapsing onto what felt like solid, gravelly ground, a rarely used, forgotten dirt road. She lay there, gasping, every muscle screaming, the whispers still echoing faintly around her like distant static. Hours later, dazed, shivering, and covered in scratches, a park ranger found her, pulling her out of the encroaching dusk. Anna mumbled about getting lost, about the sudden, thick mist, carefully omitting the voices, the cabin, and the monstrous presence. He saw the genuine exhaustion, the unshed tears in her eyes, and nodded, offering a kind, knowing silence. Days turned into weeks. Back in her quiet city apartment, the comforting hum of urban life felt distant, unreal. She tried to go back to normal, to resume the life she had before the accident, before the forest. But the silence of her apartment was never truly silent. She'd catch a faint whisper, just at the edge of hearing, when the fan whirred down or the refrigerator hummed. One evening, staring blankly at the wall, lost in thought, she reached for the locket around her neck. She opened it, gazing at the smiling faces of her family, a cruel reminder of what she'd lost. Her thumb absently brushed the polished surface of the locket's mirror. For a fleeting, horrifying second, her reflection shimmered, wavered, and then, superimposed behind her own pale, terrified face, appeared a gaunt, skeletal face with hollow eyes, its features indistinguishable from the swirling mist itself. Its mouth, a wide, black chasm, formed a silent, mocking grin, stretching impossibly wide. The whispers inside her head surged, no longer faint or distant, but impossibly clear, vibrating in her very bones. "We're never far." Her mother's voice, distorted and cold, breathed into her mind. "You can't escape us. You're one of us now." Anna screamed, a silent, primal sound, and dropped the locket, her hand trembling so violently she could barely feel it. It clattered to the floor, the faces of her loved ones staring up, unseeing. The cold sweat pricked her skin, even in the warmth of her apartment. The forest had let her go, but something had hitched a ride, and now she knew it was waiting, always, breathing, whispering. Liam, ever the cynic, adjusted the lens on his camera. "All right, team," he called to Chloe and Ben. "Let's get this content. Supposedly haunted woods, abandoned playground, prime material for the Undiscovered series." Chloe, already filming on her phone for her social media, beamed, her enthusiasm unwavering. Ben, the group's quiet tech enthusiast, double-checked his GPS. They plunged into the upstate New York woods, following what looked like an old, barely visible deer path. The air grew cooler with every step, the sunlight dappled and green, already feeling heavier, denser than the air outside. Deep within the silent woods, they stumbled upon it, an abandoned playground. Rusted swings hung crookedly, their chains groaning a low, metallic sigh in the faint breeze. A sandbox, choked with dry leaves and brittle weeds, sat beside a dilapidated slide, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The slide itself stood like a broken monument to forgotten joy, its colors faded to a sickly yellow. An immediate, unsettling feeling washed over Liam. This wasn't just old, it felt profoundly wrong. "Perfect!" Chloe exclaimed, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, setting up her tripod with practiced ease. As she fussed with the camera, a soft, high-pitched giggle echoed from the direction of the swings. Liam and Ben exchanged a quick, nervous glance. "Probably just some local kids," Ben mumbled, trying to sound casual, but his eyes darted nervously into the surrounding trees. Liam, to prove a point, picked up a small, jagged rock and tossed it towards a particularly thick stand of trees nearby. The sharp, unmistakable snap of a heavy branch breaking resonated through the quiet, far too loud to be an animal, far too deliberate. Then the footsteps began, faint at first, like someone running softly on a cushion of leaves, then quicker, a rapid patter, circling them, always just beyond their sight. The giggling returned, more frequent now, sometimes sounding genuinely delighted, sometimes subtly, chillingly sinister. Liam gripped his camera tighter, his knuckles white. "Okay, this is getting really weird," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. They tried to pack up their gear, but the barely visible path they'd followed into the woods seemed to have simply vanished, swallowed by the encroaching undergrowth. They were stuck. The giggles abruptly stopped. An oppressive silence fell, deeper than anything they had experienced before. Then, a chilling, sing-song voice, thin and impossibly childlike, whispered from the deepest part of the woods. "Ready or not, here I come." A wave of pure dread washed over them, cold and absolute. They heard the unmistakable sound of something dragging through the leaves, heavy and slow, now closer, then a ragged, heavy pant right behind Ben. Ben let out a choked gasp, spinning around, seeing nothing but the dense, impenetrable trees. "Run!" Liam yelled, his voice raw with panic. They scrambled, pushing through thorny bushes and tangled vines, running blindly through the thick, darkening woods. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, burning in their lungs. The giggles followed, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always accompanied by the dragging and panting. The game had escalated beyond their control. They were no longer the players, they were the prey. Through a small, unexpected clearing, they saw it. A small, moss-covered stone well, its opening strangely covered with a heavy, rusted metal grate, like a forgotten prison. It felt ancient, radiating an oppressive, stagnant silence that seemed to soak into their bones. As they stumbled past it, Ben, running a desperate step behind, tripped over a gnarled root, twisting his ankle with a sickening crack. He let out a desperate cry of pain, collapsing to the ground. "Ben!" Chloe screamed, her voice a fragile thread of terror, turning back to help. Before Liam could react, a small, pale hand with unnaturally long, spindly fingers emerged from under the rusted grate of the well, slick with unseen moisture. It grasped at Ben's ankle with shocking force. Ben screamed, a raw, piercing sound that tore through the air. He was dragged violently, his screams abruptly cut short as he vanished into the dark, silent depths of the well. The rusted grate settled back into place with a dull, heavy clunk, leaving only the chilling silence where Ben had been. Liam and Chloe stood frozen for a beat, the horror of what they'd just witnessed paralyzing them. Then, raw, primal terror took over. They turned and ran, fueled by an animalistic adrenaline, not daring to look back at the well or the unseen thing that had claimed their friend. They ran until their lungs burned, until their legs wobbled, eventually bursting out onto a remote gravel road, gasping for air. They didn't stop, didn't look back until the last of the oppressive forest was behind them. Days later, Ben was never found. The police, after a perfunctory search, found no well, no playground, just an unremarkable patch of forest. Liam, now back in the sterile, too-quiet safety of his apartment, was haunted by the high-pitched giggles he'd hear at random moments. From the empty hallway, from the quiet street outside, always just out of earshot, but undeniably there. And Chloe's once vibrant social media posts, now sporadic, were filled with eerie, unexplainable glitches. Distorted faces in her reflections, fleeting shadows in the background of her videos, and faint, unsettling children's laughter, subtly woven into her audio, dismissed by her followers as creepy editing. They had played a game in the woods, and something had followed them home, and it wasn't done playing. Josh, a skeptic at heart, still found himself drawn to the folklore, especially when Chloe, his adventurous girlfriend, was involved. Chloe, an avid ghost hunter with a popular online channel, had practically dragged him to Epping Forest for an organized paranormal investigation at Hangman's Hill. The hill itself was known for an odd optical illusion. Park your car at the bottom in neutral, and it supposedly rolled uphill, as if pulled by unseen hands. They'd tried it, feeling the eerie, inexplicable tug, a chilling preamble to the night's main event. It was just gravity, Josh reasoned, but even he felt a prickle of unease. During a scheduled break, while others huddled around portable heaters, sipping lukewarm tea, Chloe's eyes glinted with mischief. "Let's explore," she whispered, tugging at Josh's arm, just a little off the main path. The spirits might be more receptive to fewer people. Despite his misgivings about venturing off-script, her enthusiasm was infectious. They slipped away from the group, plunging deeper into the ancient, whispering woods. The air grew strangely still, the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife fading into an unnatural quiet. Then a faint, mournful singing began to drift through the trees, a melody so hauntingly beautiful it pulled them forward, an invisible current guiding their steps deeper into the inky blackness. Then, through a sudden clearing in the swirling mist, she appeared, a woman in a flowing white dress, her blonde hair luminous against the gloom, her face flawless as porcelain, eyes a captivating, impossible blue. She seemed to glide rather than walk, radiating an ethereal peace that disarmed every ounce of Josh's skepticism. Both he and Chloe were instantly mesmerized, rooted to the spot, unable to speak or even breathe properly. Her presence was both terrifying and utterly captivating. The woman in white extended a hand, a gesture of serene, ancient invitation. Chloe, as if in a trance, stepped forward, her eyes wide and unblinking, drawn by an irresistible force. The woman embraced Chloe, and as their bodies touched, a terrifying change rippled through Chloe. Her beautiful blue eyes flickered, then turned a deep, unsettling, featureless black. Her skin pulsed faintly, and a thin, veiny network briefly appeared on her face, throbbing subtly beneath her skin, like something struggling to break free. Josh felt a jolt of pure terror. He tried to move, to call out, but he was frozen in place. A silent scream caught in his throat, a helpless witness to this horrifying transformation. The woman in white turned her gaze to Josh, and her serene face, once so beautiful, contorted into a horrifying, vibrating mask of pure agony. Her eyes, once captivating blue, were now black, gaping holes, swirling with an unknown, ancient darkness. A high-pitched, piercing wail ripped through the forest, a sound of unimaginable sorrow and rage that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality itself, echoing endlessly through the ancient trees, vibrating in Josh's bones. The mist around them swirled violently, as if in torment, mimicking the anguish. The wail, agonizing as it was, shattered Josh's trance. The paralysis broke. A raw surge of primal adrenaline fueled his limbs. He charged forward, tackling Chloe away from the monstrous entity, pulling her violently from its embrace. As he made contact, he felt a blast of Arctic cold that burned his skin, a searing internal chill like diving into frozen water. He heard Chloe gasp, and for a fleeting moment, he saw her eyes briefly return to normal, wide with terror, before she stumbled and fell. "Run!" he gasped, pulling her to her feet. They scrambled, pushing through thorny bushes and tangled vines, running blindly through the now hostile woods. The wailing woman's cries, though fading, seemed to chase them, a constant, chilling echo in their minds, urging them to return. They ran until their lungs burned, until their legs wobbled, eventually bursting onto the main road, gasping for air. They didn't stop, didn't look back until the last of the oppressive forest was a dark, receding line behind them. Days turned into weeks. Back in their quiet city apartment, the comforting hum of urban life felt distant, unreal. Chloe seemed herself, physically unharmed, but there was a new, unsettling quiet about her. She now avoided mirrors, a nervous habit she'd never had before. And sometimes, in the dead of night, Josh would hear a faint, distant wail, not from outside, but from somewhere inside their quiet apartment, a sound of profound, ancient grief. When he heard it, he felt a chilling cold seeping from his own skin, and he'd glance at Chloe, sleeping peacefully beside him. Was she truly peaceful? He wondered if he'd truly saved Chloe, or if he'd merely brought a piece of the wailing woman and her eternal torment back with them, a silent passenger sharing their home, waiting to reveal itself again. Ava, a cynical architect, and her fiancé, Chris, a travel blogger, had been back in their sleek California apartment for 3 months. Their last big adventure, Japan, capped off by a controversial visit to Aokigahara. They'd walked away from the infamous suicide forest, feeling, well, mostly just tired and maybe a little morbidly satisfied. But that fatigue had slowly morphed into something else, something cold and insidious that clung to them like the damp Japanese earth, refusing to be shaken off. It started subtly, a faint, cloying smell of damp earth in their pristine apartment, lingering despite Ava's frantic cleaning. She'd scrubbed the floors, light scented candles, but the scent persisted, a phantom odor she couldn't quite place. Then came the soft, rhythmic scratching sounds from the ceiling at night, tiny, insistent claws on plaster. Ava blamed old pipes, the building settling, or maybe even the neighbors upstairs. Chris, usually a solid sleeper, began to sleepwalk more frequently, his movements fluid and unsettlingly quiet. Sometimes he'd mutter in a language Ava didn't understand. Japanese, she thought, though neither of them knew a word of it beyond basic tourist phrases. He'd wake up disoriented, never remembering a thing. Then the disturbances escalated, becoming undeniably tangible. The first night, Ava woke to the soft scratching sounds again, closer, more deliberate. She flicked on the bedside lamp, her heart thumping. Chris wasn't beside her. He was lying motionless on his back on the bedroom floor, eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Above him, faint, shallow claw marks scored the white plaster, freshly gouged. There was no way he could have done that himself, but Ava couldn't find any other explanation. No broken pipes, no critters. She nudged him, and he stirred, blinking awake, completely confused about how he got there. The next night, Ava woke up, freezing. She pulled the covers tighter, shivering. A strange dread compelled her to get up. She walked through the apartment, her breath misting in the frigid air. Every door, every cabinet, every window, and every drawer in their meticulously organized home stood wide open. The front and back doors were ajar, letting in the biting night air. Even the garage door stood agape. Chris, however, remained sound asleep in their bed, oblivious to the chaos he'd apparently caused. The third night was worse. Ava awoke to an empty bed again. Dark, muddy footprints marred their clean bedroom floor, but they didn't leave the room. They just paced back and forth, a disturbed circle around the bed. She searched the apartment frantically. She later found Chris in their backyard shed, hunched in a corner, covered in fresh dirt, his clothes torn just like when she found him in Aokigahara. He had no recollection of how he got there or why he was outside. He just shivered, confused. One night, Ava woke to Chris screaming for help. A raw, desperate cry, in clear English this time. For a fleeting moment, as she scrambled to comfort him, she saw the terrified, familiar Chris in his eyes, the man she loved, vulnerable and afraid. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that vacant, glassy stare as he fell back asleep, his memory wiped clean once more. It was the only glimpse of her Chris she'd seen since they returned. Friday night was the worst. Ava woke not to a sound, but a cold, taut sensation on her neck. Her fingers brushed against rough rope. It was a poorly handmade noose fashioned from thick red rope, tied loosely around her throat. She screamed, a strangled sound, tearing it off, the rough fibers scraping her skin. Panicked, she leapt from bed, searching for Chris. He wasn't there. As she walked through the apartment, heart pounding, she found more nooses hanging haphazardly from light fixtures, doorknobs, even the shower head, all made from the same ominous blood-red rope. In the kitchen, she found Chris. He stood before one, staring blankly at the empty space where the noose hung from the ceiling, sobbing quietly, muttering in that low Japanese drone. He was scratching at his neck, laving raw red welts, completely oblivious to his surroundings, utterly consumed by something unseen. The next morning, Chris insisted it was just a vivid nightmare she'd had, fueled by stress. His scratched neck, he claimed, was probably an allergic reaction. Ava knew better. She watched him constantly now, seeing the entity's presence not just in his nocturnal actions, but in the subtle ways he seemed to be fading, losing himself. The apartment felt colder, heavier, filled with an unseen predatory presence. She glanced at her reflection in the dark kitchen window. For a second, a shadowy figure loomed behind her, its arms outstretched towards Chris, a silent, possessive presence, its form almost indistinguishable from the shadows themselves. Ava clung to her sanity by a thread, terrified. She knew with every fiber of her being that something had followed them back from that cursed forest. It was using Chris, slowly eroding his mind, his body, perhaps preparing him for something unspeakable. And now, every night, she felt its cold breath in their bedroom, closer than ever. She didn't know what to do, how to fight an enemy she couldn't see, an enemy that was slowly, inexorably stealing the man she loved. She knew it was waiting, always, right there. Mark had been plagued by the dream for years. It was always the same, a silent, twisted forest, where the trees seemed to writhe and grasp, and at its heart, a towering, pristine old house on a steep hill. He'd always spot a solitary figure at the top window, a fleeting glimpse before they vanished, leaving him with a gnawing sense of unease. Then, the inevitable. The front door would fly open, an unseen shove from behind, and the sickening sensation of falling into an indescribable void. He'd always wake just before he hit bottom, or could remember what lay within. It was a persistent fragment of his subconscious, a terrifying loop he couldn't shake. This past Saturday, a mundane dog walk with his friends, Chloe and Leo, and their exuberant golden retriever, Boba, took an unnerving turn. Boba, usually a pro at fetch, disappeared for too long after Mark threw the ball. Concerned, Mark ventured off the usual path, deeper than he'd ever gone before. The familiar sounds of his friends faded quickly, the forest swallowing him whole. He found the ball at the bottom of a shallow but steep drop-off he'd never seen before. A sudden cut in the landscape. As he scooped it up, something caught his eye deeper in the woods. A dilapidated, overgrown ruin of a house, barely visible through the thick, grasping trees. His breath hitched. It was identical to the one in his dreams, the same peculiar architecture, the same single high window. Only this one was decaying, covered in moss and vines, its timbers groaning softly, a ghost of the pristine image in his mind. He called out to Chloe and Leo, but only an unsettling silence answered. A chilling realization washed over him. The forest had gone quiet, just like in his dream. No bird song, no rustle of leaves, only the frantic thud of his own heart. A strange, irresistible compulsion pulled him towards the ruin, a magnetic force he couldn't fight. He approached the front door, his hand trembling as he reached for the doorknob. He half expected it to fly open, as it always did in the dream. It didn't. His gloved hand met the cold, dull metal. A wave of disappointment, strangely, washed over him. Maybe it was just an old abandoned shack after all. But then a different thought solidified in his mind, clear and sharp. This is the same house. Whatever is on the other side of the door in my dreams has to be on the other side of this door. He knew, with an unshakable certainty, that if his friends were with him, they would find nothing but a dilapidated living room, cobwebs and dust. This was for him alone. He twisted the handle, his fingers numb, and pushed the door open. It wasn't the pure emptiness of his dreams. Instead, it was a vast, echoing darkness that stretched impossibly far, a blackness that felt both empty and overwhelmingly full. He heard faint, overlapping whispers like 1,000 forgotten conversations playing at once, swirling around him. This wasn't merely a dark room. This was the archival void, a place where discarded realities, forgotten moments, and the echoes of what never was were stored. He felt an intense pressure, a strange mental pulling sensation, as if his very memories were being sorted, categorized, or even sifted by an unseen force. Mark had been plagued by the dream for years. It was always the same. A silent, twisted forest, where the trees seemed to writhe and grasp, and in its heart, a towering, pristine old house on a steep hill. He'd always spot a solitary figure at the top window, a fleeting glimpse before they vanished, leaving him with a gnawing sense of unease. Then, the inevitable. The front door would fly open, an unseen shove from behind, and the sickening sensation of falling into an indescribable void. He'd always wake just before he hit bottom, or could remember what lay within. It was a persistent fragment of his subconscious, a terrifying loop he couldn't shake. This past Saturday, a mundane dog walk with his friends, Chloe and Leo, and their exuberant golden retriever, Boba, took an unnerving turn. Boba, usually a pro at fetch, disappeared for too long after Mark threw the ball. Concerned, Mark ventured off the usual path, deeper than he'd ever gone before. The familiar sounds of his friends faded quickly, the forest swallowing him whole. He found the ball at the bottom of a shallow but steep drop-off he'd never seen before. A sudden cut in the landscape. As he scooped it up, something caught his eye deeper in the woods. A dilapidated, overgrown ruin of a house, barely visible through the thick, grasping trees. His breath hitched. It was identical to the one in his dreams, the same peculiar architecture, the same single high window. Only this one was decaying, covered in moss and vines, its timbers groaning softly, a ghost of the pristine image in his mind. He called out to Chloe and Leo, but only an unsettling silence answered. A chilling realization washed over him. The forest had gone quiet, just like in his dream. No bird song, no rustle of leaves, only the frantic thud of his own heart. A strange, irresistible compulsion pulled him towards the ruin, a magnetic force he couldn't fight. He approached the front door, his hand trembling as he reached for the doorknob. He half expected it to fly open, as it always did in the dream. It didn't. His gloved hand met the cold, dull metal. A wave of disappointment, strangely, washed over him. Maybe it was just an old abandoned shack after all. But then a different thought solidified in his mind, clear and sharp. This is the same house. Whatever is on the other side of the door in my dreams has to be on the other side of this door. He knew, with an unshakable certainty, that if his friends were with him, they would find nothing but a dilapidated living room, cobwebs and dust. This was for him alone. He twisted the handle, his fingers numb, and pushed the door open. It wasn't the pure emptiness of his dreams. Instead, it was a vast, echoing darkness that stretched impossibly far, a blackness that felt both empty and overwhelmingly full. He heard faint, overlapping whispers like 1,000 forgotten conversations playing at once, swirling around him. This wasn't merely a dark room. This was the archival void, a place where discarded realities, forgotten moments, and the echoes of what never was were stored. He felt an intense pressure, a strange mental pulling sensation, as if his very memories were being sorted, categorized, or even sifted by an unseen force.